It is my great pleasure to welcome you here in the beautiful mountains of Slovakia in High Tatras to the 9th year of the GlobSec Tatra Summit Forum. 9 years ago, when we have established Tatra Summit together with Ivan Korčok, Vasil Hudák, Rastislav Káčer, just after the biggest economic and financial crisis, when the Slovak government collapsed over the European rescue plan for Greece. But ever since, Tatra Summit has become the cornerstone of the Central European debates on the future of Europe and European economy. And I'm glad that we are building on the tradition that we have started with the then Minister of Finance, Peter Kažimír, and we are now continuing with the great help and cooperation of Minister Eduard Heger and the Ministry of Finance, because without their great support and his belief in us, it would be absolutely impossible. So thank you very much for this cooperation. Let me also thank to all of our partners who have supported us, because without their support, this would be impossible. Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Slovak Investment Holding, Vyšegrad Fund, but also our corporate partners, ABB, Inobat, Philip Morris, Slovenská sporiteľňa, Slovnaft, VUB, Západoslovenská energetika, EPH, and many others. Thank you so much for your support. Ladies and gentlemen, the world has changed tremendously since our last meeting in October 2019. Sometimes I would say it is unbelievable how it can change in just few weeks in ways that were completely unimaginable before. The pandemic has completely disrupted our lives. It has accelerated trends that will have lasting impact on our economies, societies, and security. But it would be a mistake to be only firefighters, only trying to limit the impacts of the pandemic. I think as every crisis, also this one is an opportunity. It is an opportunity for those who are able to adapt. And there is no time for defeatism. We have a responsibility to build. We as GlobSec, we have adapted. Of course, we are meeting here during very special circumstances in a limited number. We all had to pass the COVID tests. Some of our guests could not come because the corona crisis in their countries, and we are facing last-minute changes, but this is the time we are living in. We'll have more time to discuss the Slovak view on the future of Europe, and that's a very good thing. We have also limited the international participation, and we will have few guests who will join us virtually. But I think it is a little miracle that we are able to meet here in Tatras physically. And I think also it is a good message to the world, because we don't know how long we will have to face COVID, whether it will be with us until the end of year or next year or maybe 2 years. But we'll have to find ways how to coexist, how not to stop the economy, how to work together, but be also responsible and have the highest standards of hygiene and security. And I think Tatra Summit and the GlobSec in Bratislava are proving this. We are meeting here in a very critical time when Europe is planning the largest recovery plan, and the Slovak government has just released its recovery and reform plan. It is a promise of the biggest package of reforms that could transform the basics of our economy. And I think it will be a very good base for our debates in the upcoming days. But Tatra Summit is not only about discussion. We are also trying to build some tangible results. And I'm very proud and happy that 2 years ago we have facilitated the establishment of the Slovak Battery Alliance here in Tatras. It was signed here 2 years ago. And today, later today, we will be showing the first Slovak battery prototype for automotive industry that will have a huge impact on transformation of the industry in Central Europe. So all I want to say is that this weekend's Tatra Summit is a living proof that we are not victims to our fate. We can make ourselves prepared and plan our recovery wisely. The Tatras outside of our windows look beautiful. We have at least arranged a perfect weather for you. But I think we have changed. We all, as a society, we are more humble, more thoughtful, and we are aware of the dangers to our economy, societies, and everyday lives. economic recovery will be a long and winding road. It will not be easy. But this road starts here in this afternoon. When I look to this room, it is full of very strong visionaries. I hope we will be able to craft a nice vision for us. So thank you for being with us, to travel to Poprad, to travel to Tatras, and spending some time on the discussions on the future of European economy. With this, thank you very much, and let me invite to the stage Maitri, who will be moderating the first session. Thank you very much.
All right, I want to ask a question to everyone. How many of you thought, even towards the end of summer, you'd be sitting up in a room like this in the Tatras? Raise your hand if you thought you'd be doing this. 1, 2. Good God, you are all such positive people, which is a great thing. Negative on COVID, and that's unfortunate. That's a good thing to hear, considering that you have issues that, again, Robert just pointed out. We've had a few people who had to stay back home because the crisis is becoming worse in their countries. Minister Le Maire is one of them. I was talking to his people even last night, and unfortunately overnight, as we all know, the numbers in France have become quite bad. A similar story again in Poland. So again, apologies on their behalf that they can't participate, but we have a fantastic panel. So let me invite on stage Vasil Hudak, Vice Chairman of GlobeSAC. He's also, of course, as you all know, a former Vice President of the EIB and a man who knows a heck of a lot about the economy in this region. And also, can I invite on stage Edward Heger. He is, as we all know, Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance for the Slovak Republic. And joining us virtually, and I'm so happy to say this, is my friend Liliana Pavlova, Vice President of the European Investment Bank. As we get this conversation started, I know we've been talking ad nauseum about coronavirus. We know that when the crisis hit us, none of us were prepared. The ECB stepped in as it was meant to. And I'm, for one, taking Christine Lagarde's latest words to heart when she says that the ECB plans to retain that monetary support till the crisis is over to ensure a recovery as we all deal with potential second lockdowns and this re-emergence in a second wave. We know the German economy held up. We know the French economy is going to stagnate in the last quarter, and also the fact that the countries in the south are facing tremendous issues because of the hospitality and tourism sector. The recovery in the East has happened. It's fragile. Jobs have been lost across the board, as we all know. And jobs are changing, the ones that have existed. The future of work that we used to all talk about as something in the future, it's here. So when we talk about resilience and recovery of the EU economy, and hone in on packages, as we will, and structural reform, as we must, perhaps the question we need to begin with is, are we using an old bandage when we talk about these packages on a brand new wound? And I mean, is this the right vaccine for the crisis we face today? Or should we be thinking more innovatively in 2020 about what we need to do and need to address when we talk about recovery and resilience? Minister, can I start with you?
Thank you very much. First of all, greetings to all of you. And thanks to the organizers for having the opportunity to be in this panel. I would like to share also greetings from Bruno Le Maire, who I spoke to this morning, and he was very sorry that he couldn't participate. As you heard in the beginning, France, also Poland, and also, unfortunately, Slovakia, we all are breaking records in the infected numbers. But this crisis is specific with one thing. You have to always look how to take advantage of this crisis as an opportunity. And that's what I will do in this situation where we don't have Bruno and Tadeusz here. And I will take this opportunity where I can share more of my views on the reform of European Union and the upcoming times. But to answer your question, we definitely have to look much more innovative. We have to think out of the box. we are in the 21st century. And I think this crisis showed, and I would say made us in certain areas naked, where we weren't able to comply with the 21st century yet, and caught us unprepared. Slovakia is a great example of that. And you cannot sleep in the best years that we had the last 10 years. You have to be always working hard and investing every good that the economy is providing in the good years. We have to invest it in preparing for the bad years. Slovakia wasn't able to do that, and therefore we are facing very challenging times. We all know it's going to be hard. We all know where the problems are, but we cannot be slowed down by pessimism or the results, bad results that we had in the past. And I'm glad that our government came in a time of being already on the crossroad. And I can tell you for us that we have a great zeal to succeed. And that's how we building also this recovery plan. And it was, I would say, a big blessing that we got these funds from EU, and it was discussed at the level of the ministers of finance. And other things I would like to share is that we also saw how the EU and European Commission and the member states were able to accelerate in so many topics that we were discussing for years, and we weren't able, should we do it, shouldn't we do it? There was too much of different opinions and not really a will to find a consensus. But as it is, in every crisis, it moves you that you have to. And that happened also on the European field. And we are having discussions on all these areas that we were struggling in finding solution. And one of the biggest solutions is that we actually took the risk of having a common debt. That we will take this money as a EU and we will invest it into the recovery facility. That's a big step forward. It is a risky step, of course. But if we are responsible enough, I think we will succeed. And therefore, what I saw, and last thought, and I will give the floor back to you, therefore, what I could see that made the things happen was two things, was the solidarity with responsibility. They must go in hand in hand. Because the problem why we weren't able to move over the last years on certain topic, and we're moving so slowly, some were too responsible, some wanted to be too solidar. I don't know what's the right word in English. But what we saw that if we put it together, I think it's the right consensus. Because those ones who have problem with the responsibility and discipline could learn from those who have it, and those who are rather keeping their own goods for themselves could learn how to share it. And if we want to live as a community, which European Union is, then solidarity with responsibility will be a crucial principle to apply for the upcoming years, with all the hard work related to it. Thank you.
Vice President Pavlova, you've had to deal with quite a bit of the response in the initial days as those compromises were agreed, talked about, discussed as a norm in the European Union. What were your findings in the approach that we took towards the COVID crisis in terms of fiscal and monetary policy this time around versus 2009, 2010, where we were told that Europe is following yet again the same track of being slow? What was your takeaway this time around?
First of all, good afternoon to all of you. Glad to see you again, Maitri. Dear Minister Heger, dear Vasil, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed a really great honor and pleasure for me to join you. Unfortunately online, but thanks to technologies, it is opportunity. Unfortunately, Luxembourg is also a red zone with increasing numbers, so this is the reason for me of not being able to be with you in person. But indeed, I mean, COVID really unlocked the potential of technologies and changed dramatically the way we live and the way we work, but at the same time it unlocked a lot of opportunities for all of us, and at the same time a lot of gaps which we need to address in order to recover successfully and long-term, looking in long-term perspective. Speaking on the overall EU response, we all have to admit that bold, decisive, and rapid pan-European response was there, and I believe that this is the reason now, even after the recent analysis, we see that the scenarios we were facing in the projections we were having are not so severe as of today as we were thinking, maybe because of the different measures and which were undertaken. Unfortunately, the recovery is ongoing, but unfortunately has lost some stream recently. This is what we see, and our economists are really also seeing recently, because it seems that the current economic growth is mainly driven by manufacturing, and maybe these uncertainties are based on, and the outlook really remains uncertain because of really rising numbers of infections, as we all can see. But at the same time, we should also agree that in these challenging times, we should see the crisis as an opportunity, and opportunity for all of us, but not only for all those who are willing to adapt, but we have to ensure that we help all to adapt. And that is why we do believe that the recovery should be green and digital. And the overall package, we see now the Minister Heger already outlined the proposal of the next generation is a very strong and bold proposal, but we should never forget that the recovery should be really focused on both digital and green.
And I want to come back to that. I want to come back to that, Vice President Pavlova, because I think that is a critical element that we need to look at, especially in the CEE region. I think I want to bring it back to you, Vasyl. I'm going to hold this report up, and you should pick this up when you leave the room, or if you can find it in the room. There was an intense amount of study done, statistics-based, fact-based, and some interesting numbers that really highlighted a few things that are there in your recovery package. Run us through the data findings that the GlobeSec team, the economics team here found, because one key bit that comes out is the green economy. It is about education for technology. It is about research and development and innovation, and most critically, funding.
Correct. Maybe before I go into the index itself, just a few words about, I think, very important question which you raised at the very beginning, and this is, can Europe really utilize this opportunity which we have now with the huge amount of funds which are coming from different sources, with the fact that we have a crisis and that we have to do something. We know that Europe and European Union kind of evolves when the crisis happens. And when you go back into the history of European Union, you realize that the banking union was actually started when the financial crisis happened. The energy union started when we had the energy crisis and the gas crisis, etc. So I think this is still a big question. When I was at Harvard Business School and we were discussing about the management of change, there are basically three key elements which you need for a change. One is you need to be very unhappy with the situation where you are. You have to have a crisis. Second, you have to have a vision. I think we were discussing, and I think Minister and Liliana clearly described that we need this vision. And we also need to have and know and see a way how to get from this crisis to the new vision. I was at the meeting in 2013 of the Ministers of Finance at ECOFIN in Milano when the so-called European Investment Plan was born, Jean-Claude Juncker and EFSI, the European Fund for Strategic Investments. There were huge hopes that this will bring Europe into something new. Unfortunately, not that much happened in reality. Europe is falling behind the United States, China, other places. So I want to keep this question which you posed at the very beginning, still a big question, whether we can really utilize this crisis and the opportunity we have in Europe and also in the region to move forward. Maybe just briefly, as you already mentioned, there will be actually a press conference on details of the so-called Strategic Transition Index. It's a new publication by by Globsec. And basically what we did, and people who did it, with Sonia Muzikarova, I believe she's here, a very talented lady who led the team. But basically what we did was looking at the Central European countries, C9, which means V4 plus Slovenia, Croatia, Bulgaria, and Romania, as well as Austria. We used Austria as a kind of benchmark, more from Western Europe, into the transition and where the countries are.
Yep.
And without going into too much details, we were looking at two sets of indicators. One were Strategic Transformation Index, which includes openness, productivity and value added, external resilience, financial structure, and then the innovation economy with such areas as education cluster, green economy, innovative capacity, and digital economy. And just to give you some outcome where countries of Central Europe fall in European ranking. So Sweden, which is the highest at around 71%, when looking at the level of macroeconomic as well as innovation potential. But then Austria is at 63. The next, Slovenia, 56, Czech Republic, 53, Poland, 50, Hungary, 49, Slovak Republic, 45, Croatia, 40, Romania, 35, 32. And it's clearly identified that the key problems of this region, also of this country, and I think Minister already defined it in the proposal for the recovery plan. It is about education, it's about the innovation strategy, innovation potential, and how to use it in the best way for the countries themselves.
I think the reason I asked that question is a very simple one, Minister. I think Ms. Pavlova also pointed out she wants a focus, and I know the European Union wants a focus on digitalization and the green economy. But the very fact that these numbers tell us that, for example, in the Slovak Republic, you have an issue. You have an issue when it comes to the level of education. You have an issue when it comes to research and development and the funding that goes into it. And a point that was pointed out about the recovery currently being based off manufacturing. If we're looking at a shorter window of finding this vaccine, looking at the next 6 months, year and a half, is this recovery plan viable to keep you going till the point where you can actually see an impact in what are longer term goals, such as education?
Thank you very much. I think the question is, what will this recovery plan be? Because definitely we need a plan. Definitely we need to have a recovery plan. But the content is the most important. And as Vasil mentioned, we have the vision. We know where we are. We're in a crisis. And what we know, the plans are being built. But the investments itself, in my opinion, are not the only solution. Because we need to have a solid foundation. And in order to get this solid foundation, and as we'll look at the EU whole as a community, we know that some countries don't have healthy public finances, if I can say that clearly. The debts that we have are climbing up, and therefore the important second leg, two legs, one is the investments, the second leg, and very important one, as important, are the reforms. Because you need to build on a solid foundation. If you just spend money on investments and don't invest into the structure of the fundings of the countries who run the countries, the budgets, then the investments will just be spent and will be over. There will be some multiplication, but in order to get the biggest multiplication and also making Europe strong again, compatible with US, with China, then we have to work on the reforms because they make us healthy from inside. So I think that's the second important element of the plans, and that's what we are pushing for, and that's what we are the greatest example of. Look at Slovakia. At the beginning of this millennium, we were in a similar situation. After the bank crisis, you know, we had a big problem. It cost us plenty of money, and we were at the edge of doing something, and we did a great reform. That catapulted us, and we had the biggest growth of GDP. Really, the people could feel it. The country was catching up the developed countries of EU. But then we didn't do nothing. We lived out of the reforms, and we lived them totally. And then we started to stagnate. And now we are again with big problems, weak investment problems. So therefore, you need to be on the edge every year, every moment. That's why it will all depend on what the plan will look like. And therefore, I say that investments are not enough. It must be connected with the reforms, because the reforms, for example, in Slovakia, education. If we want to keep up with the 21st century, if we want to be digital, you know what it means in Slovakia, digital? It means electronization. That's what you did on paper, now you will do on the computer. You do the same things. No, digital is change of paradigms. You start to think different way, because you are in a different environment. So this is very important that we have to. That's why when you ask if we need to be innovative, yes, we have to learn how to think out of the box, and that's why reforms as education and in quality of life. Okay, healthcare in Slovakia, but there are countries that have their reforms already passed, but there are still countries who haven't started, and they must, because if we want to be a good environment, we need to be strong, because as they say, the chain is as strong as the weakest link. And that's what we have to have in mind.
I want to put that question to Ms. Pavlova. Do you agree with that? Because there could be a comparison made, and I know many in the private sector think this way, where the US is throwing, almost $2 trillion at the problem, and that was just the start. Here we are talking about 750 billion euros, and then we kind of tack it on with the budget, the EU budget in itself. Are we getting hung up, and I come back to the original question, are we getting hung up on reforms? Are we getting hung up on things that must be done in the longer term, and then forgetting about the current issues that exist for SMEs that are shutting down, people who are losing their jobs, a great wide opening that we gave a few years ago to populism? Are we repeating that again, or do you think this is the right strategy, that we need to think long term in terms of fiscal and monetary policy?
Thanks. There are quite a lot of things to mention, but if you allow me, yes, indeed, I think, in fact, we have also done one very interesting study which we will publish recently, but I can really very, very briefly mention three key facts and findings of the survey and of the study of our econ department, because it is indeed what exactly you are saying. So we see that investment has started to decline. We see that 43% of the EU companies are really investing less, and really 50% of them will reduce their investments. But at the same time, 50% of them are saying that they realize now that they need to invest more in digitalization. Innovation now is more than important. Now it's a must. And really smart and green technology are really a historic opportunity for them. So really the conclusion could be three main things are needed now for us in Europe. We really need a coherent kind of a holistic, concerted European action to overcome these uncertainties. Because of those uncertainties, more than 80% of companies have an obstacle to invest, and the smaller ones may not survive even. Second is we need to complement this short-term finance, this temporary finance, with targeting investment finance, including equity type, because equity type of finance is what is missing sometimes. For example, comparing to US. So, and this is where we the EIB group, are ready to complement here and to help. And digitalization, innovation, and climate, energy transition really all call for a supportive framework in order to be successful. And really something important, really to complement what Minister Heger said, we were really now supported to temporarily have higher public debt and deficit, but But really, this investing in long-term assets like climate action, development, digital transition, with short-term liabilities should be really very carefully considered, because we need to think wisely how and when to phase out our government and interventions, and really this kind of exit management will help us really to avoid any kind of economic cliff effects, in order to maintain the credibility for public interventions. So because we see, and we already see, uneven recovery across the different member states, so we really need to have this and to be careful that the temporary measures will effectively remain temporary one. And at the same time, we need a robust and holistic long-term strategy involving and supporting the private sector, and attracting leveraging the private sector funding as well. And last but not least, I mean, a pandemic really has revealed some systemic vulnerabilities in not only in shortages in medicine and equipment, which we realized throughout the crisis, but over dependencies on certain third country providers. And this is really important now for us, really to upgrade our European capabilities to establish and to secure autonomous strategic actions in several sectors: digitalization, industrial policy, monetary policy, and health sector, health production. So this is also important, I believe, to be considered and to be mentioned.
I want to open the floor up to questions, because I think this is the fundamental thing that we'll all be thinking of as we go into the winter in our respective homes and offices. Anyone have a question for our panel?
Maybe, may I, while people are thinking, I don't want to be negative, but based on my experience with the European affairs, I still believe that there are issues that may not work in this situation. And I mentioned on one hand this three-element management of change. You have to be unhappy with the situation where you are, you have to have a vision, and you have to see the road how to get to the vision. I'm still not sure that we are sufficiently unhappy with the situation where we are. And the reality is that we are flooded with money, huge amount of money. No, but never, I think, in the history of European Union there was so much money, public money available. Most of the money is in the form of grants, so it's basically free money. You just use it, you don't have to repay. Frankly, I don't like grants that much. I believe that they do change the way how people behave, how companies behave, and I don't think this is really the best way to do it. I understand politically it was necessary for the southern countries and countries with the high level of debt, but I think this could be a problem for the future. Thirdly, we are still in a what I call optimistic bubble, because all the difficult measures, impact of COVID, are basically postponed. As Minister knows, the tax declarations are postponed. People don't have to pay mortgages. Basically, all things which are bad. We have, of course, Kurzarbeit, which is helping with the employment. But when you talk people on the ground, and I try to do it, and you go to real enterprises, they'll basically tell you, look, as soon as Kurzarbeit and this support is over, at least 1/4 or 1/3 of employees are gone, because I cannot sustain it with the situation where I am. So I have I'm afraid that we are not yet unhappy enough. We don't have yet crisis enough, which would produce this push for the change. I'm not sure about political leadership, frankly, looking at Europe. And we know that for a change, for structural change, what Edo Minister mentioned, that we do need a structural change which has to drive the investment. You need really leaders, political leaders, who are ready to go for this and suffer for the change, and deal with the fact that they may not be re-elected, because we know that big structural changes, they pay back only after, I don't know, 5, 7, 10 years. I'm not sure that we have this kind of leadership in Europe. So I want to be optimistic. I'm European. I want to see Europe flourish, but I'm not sure that we will be able. And just one example from Slovakia, and this is kind of my personal because I was at was Minister of Economy at that time, and I think one of the successes which happened at that time was to bring production of Jaguar Land Rover to Slovakia. It was actually the first Jaguar Land Rover production outside of UK, and I signed the agreement. Everything was fine, but part of this agreement was not just the production, but also to put R&D into Slovakia. This never happened. I don't know why. And I think it's not only about investment, reforms, investment, but investment in innovation, combining with innovation. And I think this is where our countries, I'm not talking about only Slovakia, but we have to combine investments with innovation, R&D, and really make this region part of the innovation hub for the whole Europe and globally.
You wanted to respond, Minister?
Yes, I wanted to add and follow up. Yeah, I think Vasil said that very nicely, that we are not as unhappy in order to move forward. But I think we have to learn our lesson, definitely. And looking at the situation where we are, and I will say it out loudly as a newcomer in the EU politics, as a Minister of Finance, governments cannot be lazy. They really must start to work as much as the private sector does. We really have to compete, and we have to keep the same pace. You as an investors or people out there in the private sector, they must work as hard as they can if they want to succeed. Governments sometimes they kind of keep up, they stagnate, you know, and that's what happened in Slovakia. So we definitely, even the debt that we have, of course, the EIB is known for the most complex due diligence. We need to apply this on the governments as well. I mean, we cannot live with the fact that we will close our eyes. We cannot do that because you see what it does in crisis. Then we just need for more money. And let's be honest, there is nothing like free lunch. And there is nothing like free grant. We know that. Those grants that we receive, we'll have to pay them back. We don't speak yet how we will do it, but we know we will. And that's why when...
But you end up getting a lot of benefits. I think the Hungarians and the Polish governments would say, well, we can get the money and we can look short term and we don't have to think long term because we're going to get what we want because this is the European Union. And that impacts in some ways the recovery process and the resilience process across the board, whether it's east, west, north or south. How do you then bring what Vasil said together with what you would like, where governments are as accountable?
Well, that's why we need to look also at the reform of the instruments that we have on the EU level for applying the rules toward the governments. I think the long-term sustainability of public finances is getting more and more important indicator of the health of the public finances. Because we see that you can play sometimes with the debt, with the deficit, etc. The debt, sometimes you say, well, it's not as much, we're growing the economies, etc. So we need to revisit and really look strategically forward if we want to be competitive. We always have to look at the EU level as first, because we are, as a European Union, one body in the world competition. So we always have that. I have to have that in mind. Donald Trump came with saying America first. It has something to it, but on the other hand, it's quite dangerous. Because if you start to be selfish, you don't work as a team player. We in EU are, we have to be team players. Otherwise, we won't be able to be strong enough to compete. And even more because we have the identity of our own nations, so it's even more difficult for us to move forward. That's why we see that some things we've been discussing for years, and we weren't able to find, because there's different mentality in Eastern Europe, Central Europe, Western Europe, and to find the compromise is sometimes very difficult. But the crisis teaches us that we have to act very quickly, and we have to, the digital age, the young people are teaching us that they are much more forward than what we are or generations before us. So on this behalf, we have to be very, the help or even every fund that we spend, it needs to be addressed. I don't believe that throwing the money at the problem is the right solution. It is a solution, for sure, but it's not the right solution. It's not the best solution, I would say. We need to be quick, we need to be smart, but because then we can get much more out of the money that we throw at the problem. And then we have to do the reforms. I really want to emphasize that.
Just very quickly, if I pick up on research and development that, as I said, didn't happen the last time around. It's part of this plan of yours. How are you going to make it happen this time around?
Again, please.
How will you make the research and development and innovation happen this time around when you have the opportunity once again to
Yes. Well,
do a strategic transformation?
Yes, I will, for example, share that again on the Slovak example. Our example, our country's story, I think is a beautiful example on how it works when you do the reform right. That's what we did in the early 2000s, and how much progress it brought. And that's what we need to do now. That's why we speak so much that we need to do reform in education. That's why we speak that we need to do the reform in innovation. But the innovation, you know, I think, again, I say a principle, but it has many to it. You cannot do a reform for the people without the people who is the reform for. So that's why we invest so much in discussion with the people who are in the innovation field, because they know what they need. So let's bring them to the table and let's work with them. I think the politics must change in a way where the politicians work closely with the experts and help hand in hand. That's the story, for example, of Taiwan. They put together experts, businessmen, politicians, and said, you know, if we want to succeed as a small country with this big country next to us, we need to put the strength together. And I think this wasn't the drill in this region that much. And I think if we do that, then the synergy will bring its effect, and we'll invest very smartly.
Do you think that's going to work, Basil?
No, I think I agree. For me, innovation has to be driven by private sector. I don't think the government itself is the one who kind of creates the innovation. It has to be created by private sector. The role of the government for me is to create the enabling environment and then to partner with private sector in creating the infrastructure around that. So let's take, Robert mentioned, today we will hear about the new battery which is going to be produced, developed in Slovakia. It's a breakthrough. It's a battery which is using artificial intelligence in cooperation with a US high-tech company. Now they are ready to do it and basically create a completely new ecosystem around this in Slovakia. What is the role of the government? I think the role of the government is to, on one hand, not to create problems. Sometimes it's difficult with the tax authorities, etc. Yeah. Yes. But let's try. But then I think the role is to create the infrastructure around that, to bring universities, the R&D into this, so that they can work together to basically be that element which makes sure that this is not just one investment of one company, but that it is multiplied in the country itself. And I think this is basically what the government needs to do, and we need to look not only in Slovakia but in the whole region. We need to look for these breakthrough projects which can leapfrog the countries ahead. So, for example, we would not create a new best diesel machine or engine, yes, but we would look at hydrogen, we would look at electric e-mobility, and we would look at things which can bring us not just one step, but really leapfrog the whole region forward, because that's what we need. The fact is that convergence, meaning how quickly the countries of Central Europe are getting closer to Western Europe, de facto stopped with the financial crisis. Since 2000, 2002, we haven't got closer to Western Europe. Actually, the distance got even bigger. So if we don't do this, the region will, unfortunately, will become the laggard of the whole.
I think the recovery and resilience, but Ms. Pavlova, it brings back the question of what you at the EIB and your teams do rather well. I know a lot of people who are in the fintech industry who decided to build their fintech companies in Eastern Europe and then promptly shifted it to London to access funding. We know that this is a problem. How do you see this working in the next months and years to bring that funding here, to keep that smart brain in this part of the world and allow that gap, as Basil says, to start closing a little bit so that we don't stagnate and we're not stuck in just manufacturing or one step above that in terms of innovation?
Well, yes, indeed. Yeah, I fully agree with really what was said. In fact, we built up structural investment gaps over the period of 15 years because I think that the European investment in the, research and development and these technologies was inadequate. So those gaps and they won't disappear with COVID, and I think now it's the right moment to address them, because now they even become kind of an investment barrier. And yes, indeed, I mean, we cannot Europe cannot stay at the sideline, because we see that all technological platforms on which we rely, and even now during the crisis, are US based. Only 5 of the top 100 fastest growing platforms and artificial intelligence companies are not European one. So I believe there are two main ways to go forward for the European approach. First, EIB research as I said, shows that we need to target startups. They are really key source and innovation. And second, those technologies and digital technologies are really the key element, and we need to bridge them all, because if Europe is at the forefront of the green technologies for digitalization, the reality is really absolutely different. So really digitalizing the European economy is the only enabler for our really competitiveness. So now this is the only way forward. For example, we at EIB, we do have 2 new pilot initiatives. One is a special guarantee facility supporting digitalization project, and second one is early stage equity investments in artificial intelligence and blockchain technologies, and really trying to help this kind of technologies, because as I already said, we should have this kind of a twin transition, green and digital, as an opportunity, because digitalization, R&D and innovation are basis for recovery, are basis for COVID pandemic to overcome, to find medicine, vaccines, and at the same time, climate change targets are impossible to be reached if we don't have the necessary technologies. So it's all about sustainable finance, digital transformation, and this is the only way for us to be competitive and to ensure that we are moving ahead. And maybe one very short comment, because Minister Heger, I very much agree with him. We need to really, we can accept higher public debts and deficits as being absolutely necessary as a response to the crisis. But really, we need to distinguish between really debt that allows us to invest in human capital, in critical infrastructure, in digital transformation, human resources and education, and debt which is used for unproductive purposes and which is not used in a sustainable manner. So, and this is very critical and and this is really crucial for all policy leaders at this very moment in order to be successful.
I think both Basil and the Minister want to respond to that. So,
well, just because I want to be fair to the European institutions, and one specific example where I think Europe actually did play a positive role and was the leader in innovation. It goes back again to batteries, but we know that Europe is very much behind Asia, US as well, but especially Asia in terms of battery technologies. And one of the ways how to catch up, it was actually led by Slovak Commissioner Maroš Šefčovič, who created the European Battery Alliance at the European level. He brought the main players in terms of the production of batteries, in terms of OEMs, companies, car companies together, and they started discussing how to catch up and how to create battery production in Europe for e-mobility. And out of this came so-called Northvolt project in northern Sweden, which was heavily supported by the European Investment Bank. And now we hope also that Innobat will be in the same category. But again, this is all positive, but then we came to the situation that it's very difficult to finance these high-tech, risky projects in Europe because you have all these limitations about state aid. Yep. So unlike in China, where you get a lot of money from government without any limitations, in the United States you have working, functional capital markets, so the companies can borrow from the capital market and from stock exchanges. But in Europe, we don't have either of those, and at the same time, we have all these restrictions on state aid. So a nice structure was created, so-called IPCEI, which is basically important projects of common European interest, which is good. It allows higher than normal state aid support, but it became so bureaucratic that I think we are stuck in the process. So again, we have good intentions, we do good things, but very often we get, again, kind of embroiled in this bureaucratic administrative process, which kind of slows down and diminishes the impact.
Do you want to come back on that? Because the financial sector would say, yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, over-regulation is always a problem. It comes out of the fear that some people will cheat, etc. Then you go more and more, and then you get lost. So I'm full fan of cutting the regulation, especially in this time if we want to move forward. But I would like to say an example, for example, in Slovakia, the innovation. You know, we have kind of two types of problems, and we have companies, successful companies, not many, worldwide companies. They did it. Now we can see, are these the only smart people of Slovakia who could do it? I think we have more, but we need to help them. And we, first of all, the first signal that we are sending as a government to the private sector is that we're not going to give you money. No, this is not about giving you free money. No, there's nothing like free lunch. We need to invest into the infrastructure, as Vasil said, but on the other hand, it doesn't stop there. We will provide you access to necessary money that you need as a loan, that you can, it must be a vital project that any who wants to start, we need to tell him, you need to have a vital project, and we will help you with it. We need to provide the sufficient assistance, and EIB, I was in a meeting with EIB just 2 weeks ago, and we're discussing how we can bring the know-how that is provided by a European Investment Bank to other countries, and is not as provided to Slovakia, to help our smart people who have great ideas, but don't have maybe so much assistance or know-how how to build a vital project. That's the first thing. And then we need to help those companies who started something really nice, but don't have the finances to scale up, because Slovakia is a small market. If you're successful on Slovak market and you want to go to German market, no way. You're never going to have so much money to do that jump from a 5 million market to 80 million. So you need to have the assistance in scale up. But again, it's not going to be a free money. It's going to be an assistant and helping you with the due diligence, will help building the project that is vital. And that's, I think, it's a big role.
Performing the role of a VC, let's say.
Sorry?
Performing the role of a venture capitalist, let's say. That is maybe the issue, that we don't look at growing that market. We spoke about it after the financial crisis, but nowhere across Europe did anyone do anything to actually attract those private investors into Europe and into the innovation, the digital, the green technology space where they thrive.
I think my opinion, and this is just my opinion, again, it goes back to the history of Europe. We have too many opinions, if I say it correctly, politically correctly, in Europe, which China and the United States don't have, you know, so they are forward here. So we have to really communicate much more and get to compromises or consensuses in these areas, because it slows us down. Those where China and United States are already decided, we're still discussing what we're going to do. So they're always a couple steps ahead. So we need to kind of overcome this one of the things.
Well, I think there's on venture capital, just one point, and I'm looking also at Ivan Lesaj, who is the head of Slovak Investment Holding, and some other people who are here from the national development banks in Croatia, in Bulgaria. Thank you for coming. This is, I think, great demonstration of resistance, in resilience, in real terms. These are ladies, by the way, ladies.
Freudian slip,
traveling
I'll
all day.
allow it.
Yeah, I'm sure if we had some minister, a lady minister, they would be here, you know, so, okay, from V4, although Alenka is, but she'll participate long distance. So what I want to say is that I think we do have some sources of early stage venture capital, and Europe did produce, even Central Europe produced many interesting startups. What we lack a lot is the scale-up capital. So when the companies get to the level of not millions of or hundreds of thousands of euros, but they need 10, 20, 50 million to be able to scale up, they have to go to US, China,
Or they come to London.
whatever. I'm sorry?
Or they come to the Silicon Roundabout.
Or they come to Silicon, exactly.
A little closer
Yeah,
to home,
that's
or
right.
used to be
Yes.
anyways.
Yeah.
Last questions from the audience. We have about 10 minutes left to talk about resilience. If anyone has a question, right, let's start with back, and then we have the lady in the stripes.
My name is Martin Walowski from SEC Technologies.
I would avoid touching that mic altogether,
Okay.
just to be safe.
Sorry, COVID restrictions. So I would like to, I'm hearing that there's great times coming for support of scaling businesses and Slovakia becoming an R&D hub. But what I'm missing is, what I see in China and in the United States, is the support of technologies for low readiness level. For innovation technologies that are, for example, supported by DARPA in the United States, that have very low success rate, but if they come to life, they are disruptive. So TRL levels of 1, 2, 3. Everything we are discussing, it's technologies that, for example, Innobot, Jaguar Land Rover, those are technologies that are in very high readiness level. But what about technologies, and where should the motivation for the private companies come to invest in such a low readiness level technologies? Thank you.
Do you want to take that?
Well, you're absolutely right, and I think if you look in the United States, who are the investors in those kind of projects? Rich private people. Government, you know, with government money, especially in Slovakia, we have to be very careful. I think we could grow to there, but let's not go too far on the bridge. So I think step by step, and we do with Slovak Investment Holding some projects, but we have only limited amount of money, and that's why we need to kind of collect more and invest, multiply, bring back, and step forward. So definitely we want to go toward that, but I think we need to encourage also the sector of private investors, and not just from Slovakia. Slovakia must become attractive to the Europe, to the world. So for this kind of investment, so we need to do also, I think, much more effort on PR, public relations, you know, really promoting Slovakia, that it's on the map. We have successful stories that you can invest, and I will gladly help that, because that doesn't cost that much money, but could be effective. So definitely on board on that, for that.
Maybe just if I may, on this, here maybe we agree almost on most of the issues, but here I would take really a more risk, and I know it's very difficult as minister myself, difficult to argue, but I would take actually more risky approach, and I would put even public money, especially the money which is coming from recovery fund, etc., into really this early stage risky projects. And the reason why is that when I spoke with Rado Danilak, he's here, our genius from Silicon Valley, who is behind many innovative companies he created, sold in the United States. And one thing which, when we discuss, which struck me as very interesting is why he and other people, inventors from the United States, for example, are looking now at Europe, is that when he created these companies, and he went through different rounds of investment, mostly through private sources or funds, etc. He eventually, or co-founders of such companies, they, after several rounds, they end up, because they all dilute, they have to sell some shares. So they eventually end up with maximum, I don't know, 10%, maybe even less, 5%, 7% of the company that they actually created. What Europe can bring, which is very interesting, is that by using public money, investing into such companies, you don't push such dilution. So for the inventors, this is very interesting, very attractive opportunity to come to Europe, create new company, get funding, without being diluted in terms of your shareholding. But I think the government should take the stake, and I think Slovak National Holding is a good example, but should be partner in this, but in not as aggressive ways, for example, in the United States. And I think we can create very interesting, very attractive environment for such investors and inventors to come to Europe and to do their development and their new innovations in Europe because of the availability of such public funding.
If I can flip that around and ask simply, why can't we create a Silicon Valley style financing system? It's not that hard. It's about giving attraction levels and the ability for private finance to come in and drive that innovation, take the risks that they do for disruptive technologies because they're taking a risk. It's not public money on the line. Why can't we do that? Why does it feel like it's such a stretch?
Let's do it.
It's easy for you to say,
No,
but I'm wondering why we're not able to get there after
I think
so
you're
many
hitting
years.
the nail. On the other hand, you know, if you would start to speak to the people from the state, you would get such a list of acts and laws and everything that is impossible, etc. That's what I get as a politician when I speak to my employees, my colleagues, and they say, well, but the law doesn't allow that. I say, let's change the law. So I think it's, again, it's the leadership. That's what Vasil said. We have to look at the things, how to overcome them, not how to be stopped by them. So it's not going to be easy. Of course, with the government, with the transparency that you want to have because you're using public finances, you need to do much more than what you do with investors' money. So it is slower, it is more difficult, but on the other hand, we have to go toward it.
Let's get a last question from the lady in the stripes.
Thank you very much for a very interesting conversation. I think that might have to do actually with the lack of a large consumer domestic market in Europe, partially, that we are not able to manage to do that yet. My question to you is, I've heard many interesting things today. Like we need digitalization, we need to digitalize our businesses. America first is not the right approach. Yet what I hear in a political narrative, you know, at the level of Brussels, but also member states, is that we are trying to step up with some regulatory power here. You can see that also how some of the decisions we're making, some of the regulations that are being chosen, what's happened with the EU-US Privacy Shield can endanger a lot of companies in the digital economy. So I was wondering how you see things moving forward. Are we not closing ourselves to the rest? Should we not better embed the global free trade as a principle in whatever regulations we're enacting? Thank you.
Since we have 3 minutes left, why don't we make that very appropriate question our closing question and start with you, Vice President. Let's get you to give that answer first.
Well, thank you. On one side, maybe just as a general comment, I should say that there definitely regulations, legislation, any standard setting should not kill innovation. We should find a way in Europe, and we are not very good in that. I should admit that. In being more flexible, being more open-minded, and really think more out of the box in order to attract and to have this kind of, as you said, Silicon Valley style financing. Because even we at the EIB, our EIF, our specialized fund, we do have risk sharing funding, risk financing available, but we are still not there yet globally at the EU stage. So there is a need of strong leadership in that process in order to be successful. At the same time, we know well that we need to find a way to protect ourselves. I mean, in that competitive world, and we should not distort competition, but at the same time we should be careful that the big tech and the advantages of the big tech should not kind of distort the market.
I'm going to then give your last comments, Vasil, for exactly that.
I think regulations, actually, I think one of the areas where EU is excellent is actually in the area of regulations. question is which part of regulation we take. There are some examples of regulations that actually helped with the innovation. For example, GDPR. It did help with cybersecurity, with the IT companies which are very much focused on utilizing this. On the national level, when I was at the Ministry of Finance, we introduced this idea of super deduction, tax deduction. So basically you were able to deduct more than 100% from the investment of the company in the innovation from your tax base. And it was improved now, and I think this continues. So these are examples where actually regulation, whether it's European or the national level, can help with the innovation. But of course, it has to have the enlightened leadership behind.
Leadership indeed. Minister, your final thoughts, and also the fact that we've still got digital tax and the financial transaction tax that seems to suddenly be back on the table. When you look at innovation and regulation, let's get your final thoughts.
To respond to the question, well, we all live in democracy, and I think it's good that we live in democracy. But one of the key principles of democracy are equal rights. And let's be honest, it is not in human nature to promote equal rights. First of all, we're born as children who are selfish. So we need to learn the equal rights. And there comes the regulations in order to teach the equal rights. And that sometimes slows down the progress that you've been asking about. And I think it's, if we want to keep democracy, and I think we should, we need to look for a way how to promote equal rights and respecting ourselves in a way that we don't need that much regulation for it, but it will be planted into us, into education. And that goes back again to the first topic that we started with, that it, I would say, all starts with right and good education.
On that note, thank you all very much for the insightful conversation. Ms. Pavlova, Minister Heger, and Vasil, thank you again. I'm going to hand you over to Vasil because he heads the next panel.
Yeah, that's true. Yes. Yeah. So thank you for staying through the first panel. Actually, we'll go immediately into the next panel, and I would like to ask the panelists to come to the floor. Ignacio Jacuto,